Now in theaters, probably on Blu-ray and streaming by the time you watch this, is A Disturbance in the Force: How the Star Wars Holiday Special Happened. This is a documentary, new documentary by Jeremy Coon and Steve Kozak about how the Star Wars Holiday Special happened. Okay, I have to upfront say, I'm a defender of the Star Wars Holiday Special. So much about and it's said in the documentary, so much about art and culture, you kind of have to understand the context and where it came from. I first saw the Star Wars Holiday Special the one time it aired on TV back in November of 1978. I was a 4-year-old kid who was Star Wars obsessed, and I'm flipping channels, had no idea that this thing was going to be on, land on CBS, and it's Chewbacca. It's a Chewbacca family on my TV, and it's on video. It's not film, it's videotape, which feels more real and immediate. I'm like, what is this? How Star Wars is on my TV? In those days, you went to the theater to see Star Wars, and if you loved it, you saw it again and again, but eventually it left the theater, and that was it. The only way you could re-experience Star Wars was by looking at the bubblegum cards, looking at the storybook, reading the novelization, listening to the record that had the dialogue or the soundtrack, playing with the action figures, although at this point they didn't exist, or looking at the comic books. Like, unless it decided to come back to your local theater or get re-released, it was gone. Like, you had no way to re-experience this other than like everything else except the movie itself. So and at the time, as a 4-year-old, I didn't know a sequel was on the way. So as a 4-year-old, I flip on the TV and it blew my mind. Like, what is this? This is amazing. And it was a variety show. A lot of people who trash the Star Wars Holiday Special, and yes, the Star Wars Holiday Special is ridiculous and the people involved with it don't even think it's very good, but it was of its time. I was a kid at the time who loved the Donnie and Marie show. I loved variety shows, Carol Burnett. It was very, very common for this kind of stuff to be on TV. So it didn't bother me at all as a little kid. I was just thrilled that there was new Star Wars content on my TV, and the cast of the movie in relatively small doses was on my TV. What is this? I watched it, I thought it was great. And then, as a 4-year-old, you don't retain a lot, life goes on. And years later, I'm talking with my friends like in grade school and high school and junior high, and I'm like, do you remember something about Chewbacca's family that was on TV? It was like this collective, I kind of think that might have happened. And it wasn't until the internet came along that I saw it being mentioned and other people talked about it. And I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, that's what that thing was that I saw. And eventually in college, a friend of mine got a bootleg VHS copy. The only reason this thing exists anywhere that anybody can see is that a few people recorded it at home back in 1978, and the tapes survived. They didn't record over it. They didn't throw the tapes away. The tapes didn't degrade. And copies of copies are what has gone around forever. It's never been officially released. George Lucas disavows it. And that's part of what has the heat on this thing, is people saying, well, George Lucas doesn't want you to see this, so I really want to see this. So this documentary talks about, as it says, how the Star Wars Holiday Special happened. And I was really nervous this was going to be like one of those lame VH1 shows where it's a bunch of young comedians just cracking wise and just mocking this thing that, is an easy target, frankly. And there's a tiny bit of that. There's a little of that for joviality, but it's really mostly talking to people who were involved with the production, writers, producers, directors, some Lucas people, some people who were involved with various levels of the production, some super fans who remembered seeing it at the time, and then some more contemporary people. You don't have any direct involvement by George Lucas in this, but you get a lot of interview clips of him over the years. You get interviews with various people, and you learn a lot about a really interesting period in Star Wars history, which was the time between Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, where all of us didn't know, as a 4-year-old, I didn't know that there was going to be another movie coming. Movie news isn't quite what it is now. It was pre-internet, so if you read the fan magazines, you might know this, but otherwise it wasn't really talked about in culture all that much. There's a sequel coming, and it's going to be about this, or there's a sequel coming in 3 years or 2 years or whatever. So this weird period that one of the fans in the film, now adult fans, mentions, was that it was this Wild West period of Star Wars where it could be anything. You had the Miko Star Wars disco song, and you had the Star Wars comics that were really wild, and you had all this other stuff and all this theorizing about what the next movie was going to be, but you didn't really know. And that allowed for something as bizarre as the Star Wars Holiday Special to come out. So if you don't know what the Star Wars Holiday Special is, it was done for CBS. It only aired once. It is shot on videotape. The story per se surrounds Chewbacca trying to get home for Life Day. that's, call it Christmas, call it Rosh Hashanah, call it whatever you want. But this celebration on the Wookiee planet is Life Day, and Chewbacca is with, this show opens with Chewie and Han Solo in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, and they're talking about they're being, chased by TIE fighters, and they're trying to get back for Life Day. And the majority of it takes place amongst the Wookiee family. So you've got Chewbacca's wife, son, and father, I guess, or the grandfather character. And then a little bit, and there's a little scene in the cantina, and there's some other stuff, and it has the overall general vibe of Star Wars if it was done as a sketch on the Carol Burnett Show. Including having Harvey Korman playing a couple roles, and you get Art Carney, and you've got B. Arthur, and you've got Diane Carroll, and Jefferson Starship does a song that I think is actually a rather good song. It's like a little musical performance in there, and it's goofy and it's weird, but it's really not that goofy or weirder than any TV variety show of the day. And this documentary does a great job in showing us that and saying, look, you have to understand, this is what was on TV at the time. And the people who made this were people who came from that world. It wasn't really, Lucas didn't really have much to do with it other than the basic idea for the story, as it were. And it's a fascinating peeling back the layers of the onion of failure, as they say somewhere in this. I mean, it's this weird thing I'd say it's not easy to see, but it kind of is now. I think it's on YouTube. I think it's not that. I don't think Lucasfilm really aggressively goes after taking it down when it gets posted anywhere. So if you want to see it, you should. You really probably should watch it before you watch the documentary, although if you don't, the clips in the documentary seem even more out of nowhere and outrageous than they already are. The documentary does a great job at balancing the gentle mocking and going, what were they thinking with this special, with just production information. A lot of behind the scenes photos, a lot of interviews with people who made it, the writing of it, talking about how it was kind of a disaster from the start, saying that it really existed solely to keep Star Wars in the popular consciousness between the films and to help sell the toys that were finally ready. A little Star Wars tidbit is they had no merchandising ready when the movie came out. They didn't have any of the toy line or anything, and it wasn't until the next Christmas that the toys were starting to finally come out. And within the Star Wars Holiday Special, if you can find the version that has the commercials in it, there is a commercial with C-3PO and R2-D2 saying, presenting this Christmas the Star Wars toy line. This special kind of existed half for the popular consciousness. Don't forget, Star Wars exists. There's more coming. And the other was, hey, guess what? Star Wars exists, and we have toys now. So this was really, really good. Really well done. Really done clearly by Star Wars fans, down to every time somebody's speaking on camera and their little lower third saying who they are, it's a replication of the little blurb or the little card numbers on the Star Wars trading cards, which I thought was a very nice touch. And it was really, really good. It was funny. I saw this in a very nearly sold out audience at my local Alamo Draft House. Everybody had a blast. There was laughing out loud, applauding at the end. It was really great. This is something I'm going to buy as soon as it's available legally. Hopefully this will have a physical media release. These days it's kind of harder to tell whether things will or not, but this should go on Disney+. Disney+ really should buy this. They should put the damn holiday special up so people can see it finally legitimately. And it's not going to hurt the Star Wars brand. It's not going to hurt the Star Wars brand any more than a lot of other things already have. And it's part of the story. It's part of Star Wars history. So if you can find it, I highly, highly recommend A Disturbance in the Force: How the Star Wars Holiday Special Happened.